This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so far we discussed about certain points which are related to basic business processes like basic accounting, your processes like GL, AP, AR, cash, bank, taxation, your asset accounting and all. Now let us try to talk about certain points. What exactly we will do as a FICO consultant in any organization. Okay, when we talk about what exactly we will do as a FICO consultant in any organization, make sure first you will understand activities of a FICO consultant. When we write about activities of a FICO consultant, here we need to understand different points related to SAP FICO before you step into what activities you are going to perform. First point, as a FICO consultant, whenever we are talking about projects. You're talking about projects, meaning before you step into activities of a FICO consultant, understand what are the projects that you have in SAP. Usually you will have implementation project, you will have rollout project, you will have support project. Currently you also have something called migration project. You will also have upgradation project. Now these are the typical 5 kind of projects where you will be possibly working if you become a FICO consultant. Now there is no rule, there is no guarantee that once you get a job in your project, you may be allotted to an implementation, rollout, support, migration, upgradation. Depending on the company, depending on the requirement, depending on the client, you may have to work on any of this project. Meaning, when you are representing yourself as a FICO consultant, you should be flexible. When I say you should be flexible, make sure you are able to handle, you are able to work in any of this project, as there is no rule that you will be working or you will be assigned, you will be tagged to any of this project strictly. It is not certain, it is not guaranteed. You may be working in implementation, support, rollout, migration, upgradation, depending on different factors. But as a FICO consultant, we need to make sure you will be in a position to handle. And that understanding, that skill set is what you have to learn, develop during your training. Okay, now in the implementation project, in the rollout project, in the support, migration, upgradation, there may be different activities performed. Some activities may be common everywhere. Some activities may be specific to a particular project, like whatever you do in the implementation, you may not be doing it in rollout. Whatever you do in rollout, you may not be doing it in support. Similarly, whatever you do in support, migration you may not do. Whatever you do in migration, you may not do it in upgradation. Meaning, the way project is getting changed, you have to also change your style of working, understanding of the activity task. Here, what we need to do is, you need to again think about your resume. You need to again think about your resume. When you're thinking about your resume, we are all aware that whenever you prepare your resume, you are going to put something called clients. In resume, you will mention client, and under every client, you will put something called project type. Under every resume, you are going to put something called project type. I would say client ABCD, project type. One of this I am going to map it. Maybe implementation, rollout, support, whatever it is, you are going to map it. And below that, you will put something called duration. Below every project, you will mention something called duration, meaning whether it is a 6-month project, 1-year project, or 2-year project, 3-month project. This may not be the project duration. Typically, we are representing our contribution duration to the project, meaning in a particular client, you may be there only for 2 months. Then you are going to update your duration only for 2 months. And under that particular project, for that particular duration, you are going to write something called roles and responsibilities. Under that particular project, we are going to write roles and responsibilities, meaning for that particular project, for that particular client, whatever the activities which we did, we are going to update in your resume. Now, when you write or when you update these points in the resume, most of the times what we all will do is we will copy from something and we will paste it here. When I say something, you may be copying from your Google, from your colleague resume, from your friend resume, or you may write some points on your own based on your understanding, based on your learning. Now, this is where we will get stuck. This is where we will have confusions as to what you need to actually update there. Now, to understand this point, you need to first understand activities of a FICO consultant. And based on this, you need to have the different type of project. And in the resume, what you are going to update, everything will have a connecting point. And if you are able to connect one point with the other point, you will have a clear clarity. Tomorrow, when somebody is asking you a question or you are talking to somebody, you will sound confident. Else what will happen, irrespective of the point, project, resume, client, project type, duration, we will end up telling only the configuration. Why we will tell only the configuration? Reason, most of the times we will be writing like enterprise structure. These are the common points that we will be putting in the resume. Enterprise structure, chart of account, fiscal year variant, posting period, tolerances. Okay, again you will put GL, number ranges. Okay, and then you will put customer, vendor. These kind of things you will put. Everything is related to config only. Whatever we put under the project as per your role and responsibility, everywhere we will put the same point. Then why we are putting the same point? Because we are actually not aware what needs to be updated there, and for that particular project, for your duration, for your level of experience, what is actually going to be your contribution or what activities you are actually going to perform. If you put accordingly, the moment somebody is looking at your resume, they will get a positive opinion, they will get a positive feedback. Otherwise, what will happen, the moment you put this kind of a point, everybody understands, okay, this is a typical resume, this is like the standard resume. Because we are not considering, we are not even looking at what project we are putting, we are straight away putting everything. Now everything is something called configuration. Everything is part of configuration only. Whether I talk about enterprise structure, chart of account, fiscal year, leading ledger, non-leading ledger, global parameters and all, customer, vendor, BP, asset, tax, cash, bank, APP and all, everything is your config only. Meaning, whether you put one line, whether you put 4 lines, you're talking about one single bullet point called configuration. You're getting one single bullet point called configuration. Now, apart from configuration, what do we know as a FICO consultant activity matters? Apart from FICO consultant, what do we do as a consultant matter? Meaning, you need to start from the first project. When you're starting from the first project, you're talking about implementation project. Usually in the implementation project, first thing what is going to happen, you're going to do business process understanding. As a consultant, you are going to understand business process. This is also called as requirement gathering sessions or workshops. You'll be either participating in the workshop, requirement gathering session, or business process understanding session. Now, what you are going to do in these activities, what you are going to do in these areas is you are going to sit along with the client. You are going to sit along with the client, and when I say you are going to sit along with the client, now your project is of two categories. One is your on-site, other one is off-site. If I'm talking about on-site, you will be sitting or you will be working in the client location. If I'm talking about off-site, okay, if I'm talking about off-site, you are talking about you are sitting in your company. One is your client location, the other one is your company's location. For example, on-site is your client location, off-site is your company location. If you're sitting in the company location, this is your offshore project or offsite project. If you're sitting in the client location, client office, that is your on-site project. You need to understand how these requirement gathering sessions are conducted. Both are possible. When I say both are possible, if possible, let's say you are traveling to the client location, that is where you say, I went on site to the client location, or I am traveling to the client location. When you go to the client location, you will be conducting either business process understanding session, or requirement gathering session, or workshop. Based on this workshop conducting or requirement business process, you are going to sit along with the client if it is on site. If it is offshore, if it is offshore project or if it is offsite project, there will be the meeting request. There will be meeting request. Either you will be sending a Teams meeting or Skype meeting, Zoom meeting, anything. Majoritarily, these are conducted in these are conducted in your Microsoft Teams meeting, because in every organization you will be using a Microsoft Teams as your communicator. So these meetings are conducted in Microsoft Teams. Either you will send a meeting invite, meeting request to the business users, or your project manager or your project lead or your senior consultant will send a request to the business team. Now, maybe this may be scheduled for 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, or half a day, full day, depending on the requirement, depending on the timelines that are decided by the project manager. Assuming that every day 3 hours scheduled, every day 3 hours is scheduled. For these 3 hours, what we will do is, you are going to understand the client business process. How and what you are going to understand from the client business process, with whom you are going to talk in the meetings. You are going to have somebody called user, you will have users. When you're talking about user, you're talking about end user. You're talking about user, user is nothing but end user. Within the end user, you call it as core team members. When you talk about core team members, or you call it as CTMs. When you're talking about core team members, or you call it as super users, or you call it as process owners, SMEs, subject matter experts, something like this. In each project, in each company, there will be different terminologies. Meaning, you are not supposed to stick to a single terminology, and don't say that only if you ask this point, I will be able to connect it to the point. If the terminology is changed, if a different word is used, don't think that I am not able to connect it to this. As a consultant, you have to be flexible, you have to be dynamic, because you cannot know if the other person may be talking the terms using the words that you are aware of. He may not be using the terms words which you are not aware of. Make sure based on the conversation you are able to understand, even though they are giving wrong information. If you are not able to understand, with the help of the total conversation, you can visualize, okay, what it is all about. When you discuss with these users or core team member and all, they are going to explain their current business process. They are going to explain their current business process. When they explain the current business process, that is usually called as your as is process. When they explain their current business process, that is called as is process. This as is process is what you are going to understand in these gathering sessions. Whatever you call it as business process understanding, requirement, workshop, you are going to understand their current process, which is represented as is process. Once you understand this as is process or current process, you are going to document it, because whatever they tell, whatever they show, you will be able to understand, you will be able to remember at that moment. After that, tomorrow morning, everything will be fresh in our mind. We don't remember what happened yesterday because we will forget it. Quite common for everybody. What you are going to do after the workshop conducting or workshop is over, you are going to document whatever the points that you are discussing, whatever the questions that you are asking, whatever the process that they are showing, you are going to document according to your understanding. When you are writing according to your understanding, you will be sending either minutes of meeting to your client, or you will be sending minutes of meeting internally to your team members within the project team. Meaning every day you are going to understand the process whatever we discussed, and if you have any points where you need clarification from the user, In the next session, you are going to ask them, this is the point that we have discussed yesterday. However, we have some clarifications on it. You will ask for the clarification, you will get further information on it. If they have the clarification, if they have the further information, they will provide. Otherwise, they will tell that this is the current process manual that we are following. Please find the current manual, or please find the current SOP, standard operating procedure, which we are following in our existing system. Now, when you're talking about the current process in the existing system, you're talking about something called a legacy system. You're talking about legacy system. When you're talking about legacy system, your legacy system is the current used ERP application. Legacy system is currently used ERP application which is other than SAP. When you're talking about other than SAP, you may be talking about Tally, you may be talking about Oracle, you may be talking about JD Edwards, you may be talking about Microsoft Dynamics. There are so many applications in the market. There are so many applications in the market in which you can do your accounting. So any application other than SAP is typically represented as legacy system. From the legacy system, whatever the process that they are currently following, they will give you the manual or SOPs for you to have clear process understanding, because when they explain, they will not be able to explain in detail, in depth, because of the time constraint. Your meeting may be scheduled for a couple of hours. Within these couple of hours, they may not be able to explain everything. You may not be able to understand everything. So there will be a gap. For that reason, they will give you the existing process manual, documentation, whatever you have. You will be going through those documentation. Okay, this is the user manual for the separate business processes. Now here, when you conduct as is process, you are going to split business processes. When you're talking about business processes, you're talking about points like GL, AP, AR, and then your cash, bank, assets, taxes, and then different reports. Whatever is usually handled, whatever usually happens in the accounting side, those points is what your business processes, meaning you are going to divide separate business processes. Now, as a single FICO consultant, you may be able to handle everything, or if the project size is big, one FICO consultant may not be able to handle. In that case, you need to understand what is your team size. You need to understand your team size. When you're talking about, or when you're trying to understand what is your team size, you need to understand it typically what will be the size of a team in any project. Here you need to always consider two members for your FICO. You always consider two members or two candidates for your FICO. You and another FICO consultant represent you as a FICO consultant, another person as a senior FICO consultant. Assuming you are a SAP FICO consultant, you have another senior FICO consultant or a lead FICO consultant. Along with you, one more FICO consultant is there. Two FICO consultants are there, and then you include other module. When you're talking about other module, include two ABAP consultant, one basis consultant. Okay, I would say two FICO consultants. Okay, two ABAP consultant, one basis consultant, and one consultant, one SD consultant. If you have production, one production consultant, and then if you will have one project manager, and if you have any other module, HR and all, one more consultant, meaning on an average 2 plus 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You'll have to tell on an average 10 is your team size. Whoever is asking you what is your team size, on an average you will have to tell 10 members are there in your consulting team or in your project team. Now if they ask you who are those 10 members, make sure you have the breakup. Somebody is asking who are those 10 members in your project, make sure you have a breakup. In the breakup include two FICO consultants, two ABAP consultant, one basis. For all other modules, whatever you think of, put one candidate for each. One one ST, one PP, one PS, or one QM, or your HR, whatsoever you have, put one consultant for each take 2 for ABAP, 2 for FICO, and then you do a counting. Whatever the number that you are getting against each project that you are mentioning in your resume, understand in this project this is the team size. When somebody is asking you who are those 10 members or 7 members, why 7, make sure you have the clear answer. On the spot you will be able to elaborate. These are the team members, these are the modules that are in scope. For each module, this many number of consultants are engaged in your project. And when you are 2 FICO consultants, the work will be distributed, work will be segregated, or work will be distributed among you two. You may be working on, let's say, you have to again clearly pick here that what is your contribution. You cannot say you worked on everything, practically not possible. So in your resume, you are not supposed to put everything under project role and responsibility. Under project and roles and responsibility, do not put everything, because practically you don't do everything, because along with you in any implementation project, there will be another consultant will do some areas, you will do on some areas, meaning you are in a position to segregate, split what is your role and what is the other consultant role. You represent yourself as a consultant, other consultant as a senior consultant or as a lead consultant. You feel wherever you are comfortable, wherever you are confident, accordingly you worked on it. Meaning, if you are telling that you worked on GL, AP, AR, cash, bank, asset, tax report, you specifically pick maybe 3-4 areas you pick. Specifically you pick 3-4 areas with the combination. Like don't only tell GL, AP, AR. Include something along with the GL, AP, AR so that you will be able to understand. When you include other areas apart from GL, AP, AR, you will be able to create an impact to the other person. Otherwise, the moment you will tell GL, AP, AR, a different opinion is formed to the other person, which you should avoid. Okay. And then the important point that you need to understand is, in each of the business processes, whatever you have, understand current process flow. When you're talking about current process flow, if you take a GL, understand what is the current process flow of a GL, right from creating a GL until generating a report from GL. What activities are carried out? Meaning, how many GL accounts do they have currently, and how their master is maintained, and are there any controls while creating the GL master, and who is creating the GL master, and how entries are posted to GL account, what kind of entries are currently posting, what kind of reports are generating for GL, meaning on a daily basis what reports are generated, weekly basis, monthly basis what reports are generated, any reconciliation activities are they doing, any reconciliation activities are they doing, if yes, what are those reconciliations which they are doing, and any problems, any issues that they are facing currently. Any problems, any issues that they are currently facing, we need to understand, so that you will have a clarity. Okay, this is the current process flow, and here there are no problems in the existing setup or in the existing business process. Everything is fine, client is happy with the current process, whatever they are doing, and how they wanted to see the process in SAP. When you understand what is the current process, what are the issues that they are facing, next one, you are going to understand what is the expected process from SAP. Are you finding any difficulties in the current system which you want to eliminate in SAP? So when you understand it, now according to you, you must have a standard business process understanding from SAP. Here you need to understand SAP standard business process. When you talk about SAP standard business process, there is something called SAP best practices. There is something called SAP best practices. As per SAP best practices, for every module GL, SAP will have a checklist. This is how GL module is used. This is how GL module functions in any organization in a generic way. Now these best practices are country specific. When you're talking about best practices, these best practices are country specific, meaning if you are working for an Indian client, if you are working for a US client, if you are working for a Singapore client or any other particular country's client, you will probably looking at that country specific best practices. More or less you will find the same documentation provided by SAP. If there is any special treatment, if there is any special case scenario treated in that particular country, SAP will include them in the best practices document. As a FICO consultant, you must know what is SAP best practices, how do you get this document, where do you get this document, how you will understand this document. Most of the times you would have heard something called standard SAP or customized. Most of the times you would have heard something called standard SAP or something called customized SAP or customization. Here we need to understand what is a standard SAP, what is customization, what is customized SAP. If you are able to slowly understand the terminology first or what is what at the beginning, slowly you will be able to connect related to the points that you are hearing in the market or that you have come across in your past. Please everybody go on mute. Okay, when you are hearing the different points, you will make sure. Yes, sir.
తిన్నా బ్రో నేను ఇప్పుడు వెళ్తానా మీరు తిన్నారా బ్రో
Okay, when you're talking about SAP, you'll have to make sure what is a standard SAP, what is customized SAP. Now, this is very frequent terminology that you will be hearing in the market, especially when you're in the interview or when you're talking to somebody. They may be asking these different terminologies. Make sure you are able to understand what do they mean by these terminologies and how do you relate it to SAP, how do you respond to those points. And now, when you talk about standard SAP, you need to understand what are the functionalities provided by SAP for a particular business process. Now, your business processes are like GL, AP, AR, cash, bank, asset, and all. Each of the business process you have to understand in detail. And when you are getting this information from the client, make sure you document it. Any documentation that you are making, you have to compile it and send it as a minutes of meeting to the client or to the internal team within your project team member. And once you understand this point, slowly what we need to do is you have to understand the current problems, current issues faced in the existing system, because every system will have a problem, and that is the reason they are planning to move on, or that is the reason they are planning to migrate to SAP. So make sure when the client is moving on to the next system, maybe from any other ERP application to SAP, they may be finding some difficulties, they may be having some issues, problems, due to which they are not happy with the system. They want to migrate or upgrade it to a latest version or the advanced version like SAP. You need to understand what issues they are currently facing and understand what is their expectation. Like client expected business process. They will tell that currently we are doing all these activities in our system where there is a lot of, they say that currently we are doing these activities wherein there are a lot of manual interventions. Going forward, when we move on to SAP, we don't want to have these many manual interventions. We want to account everything, or we want to generate everything from SAP. I don't want my users to sit on reconciliation, sit on preparing the reports, which is not having full accuracy. Because if anybody who is preparing any report related to accounting, unless it is a system driven, I cannot say this is 100% accurate, because there may be mistakes, which the user maintain, because when you're doing certain things you will be playing with the Excel formulas and all. If data is wrong, you may not have that confidence of accuracy, meaning your accuracy percentage is limited or less. You cannot say that this is 100% accurate because there is a manual intervention in it. Somebody could have manipulated the data. But whereas if your client says, no, I don't want these kind of reports to be prepared by any of the user manually, I want a system to generate the report. I want system to provide me the report on real-time basis whenever I run the report. Otherwise, what will happen? I am preparing this report. To prepare a report, it will take 3 hours for me. Now, if I wanted to submit this report to you tomorrow 10 o'clock, I have to spend 3 hours. Tomorrow 10 o'clock means what I will do? Yesterday only I will start my working. So for me to complete this report, I would have taken the report afternoon. From afternoon till evening, there may be some more transactions posted, meaning my report, whatever I am submitting to you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, may not be accurate. My report may not be accurate. When I say my report is not accurate, reason, data is not real time. I would have taken the data 3 hours back. Okay, now during the time frame, whatever I have prepared this, there may be additional records prepared. Understand, these additional records may not be accurate. Your report may not be 100% as it is figure or 100% real time number. Now these difficulties might happen, due to which your client will tell, no, I want to generate all these reports from SAP. Usually any client who is moving on to SAP, they will have a lot of expectations from SAP. They feel that in SAP everything is possible. I can do this, I can do this. This is what they hear because this is an expensive application. They feel that I can do anything, I can get whatever I want from SAP. Now what you will do here is you will have to understand the client process first. Make sure you are able to do a conversation with the client, understand their process, especially try to convince your client with the standard SAP business processes that are provided. Meaning, on any business process, your client will tell, I want everything to be automated. I want this to happen in this way, I want that to happen in the other way. Make sure you understand what is possible, what is not possible in standard SAP. Accordingly, you will deal with your client, you will deal with your user. If it is not possible, you will tell, in this way, SAP will not work. In SAP, things will work in a different way. When you are able to understand the requirement and when you know that how standard SAP works, it is easy for you to communicate with your client in a confident way. Otherwise, for every question, for every discussion, for every point, you will have to depend on the backend work. When I say backend work, you will get some requirement, you will get a question, you will get a query from your client. Because of lack of knowledge, because of lack of experience, we may not be able to answer, convince at the same time or immediately to the client. Unless you are experienced, unless you are knowledged, may not be possible. Even for experienced, even for the knowledged people, it may not be possible to explain everything on one go. So but this is only for the selected scenarios, selected situation where the things are a tricky business processes, complicated processes where the other process owners are required, where you'll have to see the feasibility whether this can be done or not. In those areas you will tell, we don't think that this can be done in SAP. However, let us explore and then come back if we can do something, or if there is any process, if there is any workaround to meet this requirement. Meaning, upfront you are not going to say this is not possible, you cannot do it. You are not supposed to say like this upfront to your client, because they get negative opinion. They say that no, they are not explaining us clearly, we are not convinced with the system. Make sure, even if it is not possible, even if it is not recommended, you don't tell upfront. Take the request, say that okay, let us work on it, let us see if we can do something to it, and then later on you will tell that we tried to match it, or we tried to bring this scenario in SAP. However, there is no solution even by SAP, and we can do a workaround, or we can do an alternative approach workaround for this, working in this manner. You'll have to give alternative solutions wherever there is no standard solution. Meaning, alternative solutions or other suggestions are possible only if you are clear with the requirement. Understanding the requirement plays a very key role in any SAP FICO project. Without that, we cannot do anything, because this is not a straightforward configuration thing based on which you are going to work. Okay, you will have your client expected business process accordingly. Now here you have to have a limitation. When you're talking about limitation, here you're talking about standard SAP, customized SAP, and you will have something called ricef list. You will have ricef list. When you're talking about ricef list, wherever there is a process which is not standard SAP, wherever there is a process which is not standard SAP, you are going to consider as a ricef list. Now, why things will come into ricef list? Ricef list is because of something called fit gap analysis. There is something called fit gap analysis. Based on the fit gap analysis, you will decide whether it is a straight fit or if there is any gap. Based on this fit gap analysis, you will find it is a straight fit or if there is any gap. If there is a straight fit, then you will talk about standard SAP. If there is a gap, then you are going to talk about ricef object. This is nothing but customization. This is nothing but customization. Now you need to understand what is straight fit and what is the gap. Now all the gaps are identified and categorized under ricef list. Now this ricef list, whatever you have, you need to make sure these points are listed here. Now in every project, especially in your implementation project, there is a limitation for the ricef object, meaning you will not consider 100 ricef object. There may be, for example, you have agreed to deliver, let's say, only 50 objects. As per the project contract, you identified or you agreed that 50 ricef objects are allowed. More than 50 ricef object you are not going to consider in the project cost. Anything which is exceeding 50, you have to pay additionally for it. Because along with the project agreement, along with the project cost, you are going to give 50 ricef object. Now this 50 ricef object, if it is exceeding, you will have to make sure the additional cost will be given for it based on the effort estimation. You need to understand one more point here called effort estimation. Effort estimation is nothing but to complete any task. To complete any requirement, you will have some effort. Meaning, you may be working for 1 hour, you may be working for 8 hours, you may be working for 3 days, 1 week, 1 month, 15 days. How many members are working? For example, you are working as a FICO consultant. If it is related to any technical aspect, an ABAP consultant will also be working, and anything to be moved to production system, you need system administrator, meaning basis consultant is required. You will also have to include your project manager, meaning you have to include the people who are involved in fulfilling this requirement, including your project manager, ABAP consultant, basis consultant, FICO consultant, any other module consultant. If you have, make sure these points are included, and what is the contribution by everybody. How many hours ABAP consultant is going to work, how many hours basis is going to work, how many hours FICO is going to work. Based on all these points, you will tell that to meet this requirement, to complete this requirement, it will take 20 hours, or it will take 50 hours, it will take 60 hours, it will take 200 hours. Now these hours will have to be approved by the client. When these hours are approved by the client, meaning if the effort estimation is approved by the client, that is where you are going to start the work. Otherwise, you will not work. Meaning any requirement which is coming straight away, you are not going to work on it. You have something called effort estimation, because anything that you are doing for your client, especially any configuration, anything is subject to charge. When I say it is subject to charge, you will have your efforts which are putting in for your client project. For all your efforts, whatever you are doing, you will have to be charged, meaning your company will be charging your client for your consulting services. Now to provide the consulting services, to collect money from your client, what your company will do, your company will be billing your client. Your company will be billing. You need to understand what is your client billing. And here your billing is based on something called a timesheet. Your billing is based on timesheet. You need to understand what is timesheet. As a FICO consultant, you have to fill up your timesheet. If you're working as a consultant, there is a frequently used term called timesheet. Is your timesheet filled up? Is your timesheet approved and all? So timesheet is nothing but to which client you are working, how many hours you are working, what you are working on. Based on the timesheet only, your company can bill your client. If your timesheet is received and if this is approved by the responsible person with whom you are working, that is where your client will approve it. Only when your client approves your timesheet, your company can give an invoice, give a bill to the client. That is where client will make payment to your company will pay salary to you, which means everything is interconnected. The cycle, you need to understand how consulting happens and what is happening with respect to your FICO. And when you're able to understand points in the easier way, or at least you have the idea about this is what is going to happen, when you're working in any project, when you're talking to anybody, it is easy for us to connect to the point, connect to the process, what happens in any project, in any environment when you're working as a FICO consultant. Otherwise, we are going to find it very difficult to understand the different terminology. So I'm sure most of you may be familiar with it, or some of you may be finding it difficult, maybe hearing this for the first time, but this is mandatory for any FICO consultant. You are not called as a FICO consultant if you are not aware of these points, whatever we are discussing now. Okay, it should not be the case wherein you are hearing these terminologies, you are hearing these points for the first time in your job, for the first time in your interview, should not be the case. You must be aware of these points so that you will find it comfortable, you will find it confident when you are talking to anybody. And when you find this ricef object and all, you have to know that these are the 50 objects maximum. Now, out of a 50 object, there is something called scope. There is something called scope. When you're talking about scope, what is in scope, what is not in scope? Meaning, you will have to understand something called in scope, there is something called out of scope. So what is in scope, what is out of scope mean? If you talk about any SAP FICO implementation or in any SAP FICO project, lot of things, there are a lot of information, like you have GL, AP, AR and all. In that there are a lot of processes, sub processes which are provided by SAP, meaning a lot of functionalities are there in the SAP, but your client may not be using every functionality. Your client may be using limited functionalities in SAP FICO. Only those functionalities which are agreed to be set up in SAP are part of in scope. Only the functionalities which are agreed to be set up are represented as in scope. There are certain functionalities which are not agreed to be delivered, not agreed to be configured. Those are out of scope, meaning while working in any project, you should know what is in scope, what is out of scope. Otherwise, you will end up working on things which you are not supposed to work. And you will skip certain things which you are not supposed to skip. Why these things will happen? Because we have no clarity, we have no clue what is included, what is not included. Whatever you purchase, they say that this is included, this is not included, meaning in scope, out of scope. For any FICO project, as a FICO consultant, mandatory point that you must be aware of. Later on, once you put all these things, you will have to document it. Once you put all this understanding, once you get all this information, you have to document it. All the documentation, whatever you have understood so far, based on your client to business process understanding, you will prepare a document which is nothing but business blueprint, which is called as BBP in general. This BBP is also called as solution design a document, meaning this is your SDD. Some call it as STD, some call it as BBP. Either way, it is one and the same. Usually for all your ECC project, we were calling it as blueprint document. BBP in the S4 HANA projects, we call it as with a new term called SDD document or solution design document. When you hear different terminologies, make sure you are able to understand what it is first. You don't have to know what is The process, whole objective of it not required, at least at high level. Get an idea, get a clarity, okay, this is related to this is related to this. Once you prepare the business blueprint or solution design document, you need to understand something called version management. You need to understand something called version management. When you're talking about version management, you need to understand in no project, your blueprint is signed off, your blueprint is approved in one go. This is not going to happen in any project, because whatever the initial understanding that you have, that may have little, the differences. Certain points you may skip, certain points you may forget to update in the document while you prepare a blueprint document, and when you send it to the client, your client is going to review the document. When your client is reviewing, they come up with different suggestions, remarks, feedback stating this process is defined incorrectly, these points are not included, or this point is not required. They will give some suggestions, feedback. Now all the suggestions, feedback, whatever you are getting from your client is supposed to be updated as version management. When you're talking about version management, initially whatever the first blueprint that you are going to send is called as a version 0 or an initial draft. You will either call it as initial draft or version 0. Later on, when you receive the corrections, when you receive the feedback, you are going to amend the document. When you are amending the document, you are not replacing the content from the existing document. You will keep the existing document as it is. Existing document will be kept as it is. You will make a copy of the document and you will prepare version 1, similarly version 2, and so on, until your client says yes, document is final. You will be keep on updating the different version. Tomorrow if somebody is asking you which version of blueprint is finalized, so don't say that 1920 or 1909 version SAP S4 HANA 2020 21 version. It is not that version, it is this version, which is your version management. So when somebody is asking you certain questions, just to check your understanding ability of the different terminologies used in a project, they will be asking these kind of simple questions, silly questions sometimes. Make sure you will not get confused with these questions. And on the blueprint document, there is something called BBP or STD approval or sign off. You need to receive the approval or sign off on your blueprint document or on your SDD document. Unless and until you receive the sign off on your blueprint document or on your SDD document, you cannot proceed further. And when I say you cannot proceed further, after receiving the sign off confirmation from your client, you are going to move on. When you are going to move on with the further stage, after receiving this, you are going to start your configuration. After receiving this, you are going to start configuration. When you're starting to work on configuration, this is where whatever usually we talk about SAP FICO, whatever we think about SAP FICO, go to a particular transaction code, add a new entry, create it, control S, all these things is what we usually understand as a FICO consultant or as a FICO course. But before you come to this configuration point, there is a lot of things that you'll have to understand. A lot of things that we have listed, and all these points you have to understand. At least you should have an idea, meaning straight away you will not work on any configuration in any of the project, no matter what. So if you are understanding in such a way that straight away SAP FICO consultant means he will log into SAP, he will understand all the configuration step, SPRO path, and he will have a document and all, then you are wrong. Because configuration is not the only activity that you will do. When you do the configuration, you have a lot of dependent activities, a lot of understanding workshops you'll have to conduct. Based on your understanding document preparation, based on the approval sign off that you receive from your client, that is where you are going to work on configuration. Once you do the configuration, there are again subsequent steps, subsequent processes which you need to execute. What are those subsequent activities, processes which we will be executing after the configuration? I'll explain later on, because First, you need to understand these points. You need to have a clarity on this. At least one basic understanding is required on these areas, so that when I move forward with the different activities, you will be able to follow. Okay, so I'll stop this here today. What I want you to do is go through this recording thoroughly and try to understand the points that are listed. And these are all the points that are listed here are mandatory for any SAP FICO consultant to understand, to know, to have at least a basic idea, basic understanding, without which it is going to be very difficult for us to manage either your interview or your project. Especially when you're in a project, you are going to find it difficult unless you are clear on this, unless you have a clarity on this. Okay, so these points go through once again. When I share the recording, make sure you refer it at least 1 or 2 times. Note down whatever the points that you have, and once I complete the further points related to it, once I complete the further continuation points on it, I will answer your questions whatever you have, because if we are not completely done, we've just started it. So once we complete the process, then you will have a lot of questions. Those questions I will answer. Now I'm not taking your questions because this is incomplete now. This is only half done. We've just started it. When I continue the session tomorrow, most of the questions whatever you have here will get automatically clarified. Okay, fine then. So let me stop the recording. Any questions that you have on this process will be answered, will be taken once I complete this full procedure, because most of the queries will get automatically clarified when I continue the session. Okay, so tomorrow we will be connecting at the same time. Good night.